On June 28, 1914, a single gunshot in Sarajevo set off a chain reaction that would plunge the entire world into the deadliest conflict humanity had ever seen. But was it really just one bullet that caused World War I? The truth is far more complicated and far more interesting. Imagine Europe in 1914 as a room filled with gasoline fumes. All it needed was a single spark. But first, let's understand how all that fuel got there. By the early 1900s, Europe was divided into two massive alliance systems. On one side, you had the Triple Entente: France, Russia, and Britain. On the other side stood the Triple Alliance: Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Italy. These weren't just friendly agreements. These were military pacts that promised if one nation went to war, its allies would jump in too. Think of it like this. If two students got into a fight at school, but each had promised 5 friends they'd back them up no matter what, a simple argument could turn into an all-out brawl. That's exactly what these alliances created, a system where one conflict could explode into a continental war. The first major ingredient in our recipe for disaster was militarism. Every major European power was locked in a frantic arms race, each trying to build bigger armies and more powerful weapons than their neighbors. Germany and Britain were particularly competitive, especially when it came to naval power. Germany wanted a navy to rival Britain's legendary Royal Navy, and Britain was determined to stay on top. Between 1906 and 1914, both nations poured enormous resources into building massive battleships called dreadnoughts. But it wasn't just about having weapons, it was about glorifying military power. Military service was seen as the highest honor. Generals were celebrities. War itself was romanticized as a noble, almost beautiful endeavor. Young men were taught that dying for your country was the ultimate achievement. This created a dangerous mindset. When you have a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail. When you have a massive, expensive military, you start looking for opportunities to use it. The second cause was imperialism, the race to control as much of the world as possible. Britain and France had already carved up huge portions of Africa, Asia, and the Pacific. They controlled vast colonial empires that brought them wealth, resources, and global prestige. Germany, which had only unified as a nation in 1871, felt like it had arrived late to the party. German leaders believed they deserved their own place in the sun, their own empire to rival Britain and France. But by the time Germany was ready to expand, most of the world was already claimed. This created constant tension. In Morocco, for example, Germany twice challenged French control, once in 1905 and again in 1911. These Moroccan crises nearly sparked wars on their own. Each crisis was resolved through tense negotiations, but they left behind deep resentment and mistrust. Meanwhile, the declining Ottoman Empire, often called the sick man of Europe, was falling apart, and everyone wanted a peace. The Balkans, a region in southeastern Europe, became a particular hotspot, which brings us to our next cause. Nationalism, intense pride in your nation and belief in its superiority, was sweeping across Europe like wildfire. While patriotism can be healthy, the nationalism of this era was aggressive and often hateful toward other nations. In the Balkans, this nationalism was particularly explosive. The Austro-Hungarian Empire was a massive, multi-ethnic state holding together dozens of different national groups: Serbs, Croats, Czechs, Slovaks, Hungarians, Poles, and many others. Many of these groups wanted independence. Serbia, which had recently won independence from Ottoman control, saw itself as the champion of all Slavic peoples. Serbian nationalists wanted to unite all South Slavs into a single nation, which meant breaking apart Austria-Hungary. For Austria-Hungary, this was an existential threat. If one ethnic group successfully broke away, the entire empire could collapse. This intense nationalism meant that conflicts weren't just between governments. Whole populations were emotionally invested in confronting their rivals. When war finally came, millions would volunteer to fight, convinced their nation's cause was righteous and that victory was both necessary and inevitable. Remember those alliance systems we mentioned earlier? They turned what should have been a regional dispute into a world war through an almost mechanical chain reaction. Here's how it worked. Austria-Hungary was allied with Germany. Serbia was closely tied to Russia, which saw itself as the protector of all Slavic peoples. Russia was allied with France. France had an understanding with Britain. Even Italy and the Ottoman Empire would eventually be pulled in through various agreements and interests. These alliances were supposed to prevent war through deterrence. The idea being that no one would start a fight if they knew it would bring multiple powerful nations against them. But instead, they created a situation where a local conflict could snowball out of control. Think of it like dominoes carefully arranged in a pattern. Once the first one falls, there's no stopping the rest. That first domino was about to fall in Sarajevo. On June 28, 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, was visiting Sarajevo, the capital of Bosnia. Bosnia had been annexed by Austria-Hungary in 1908, angering Serbian nationalists who wanted it to be part of Serbia instead. A group of young Serbian nationalists, including 19-year-old Gavrilo Princip, decided to assassinate the Archduke. The first attempt that morning failed when a grenade bounced off the Archduke's car. But later, through an incredible stroke of bad luck, the Archduke's driver took a wrong turn and stopped right in front of Princip, who was standing on the street corner. Princip stepped forward and fired 2 shots. Both the Archduke and his wife Sophie died within minutes. Austria-Hungary saw this as the perfect opportunity to crush Serbian nationalism once and for all, but they wanted to make sure Russia wouldn't intervene on Serbia's behalf. So Austria-Hungary asked Germany, "Will you back us up?" Germany gave them what historians call a blank check, unconditional support for whatever Austria decided to do. Emboldened, Austria-Hungary issued an ultimatum to Serbia, with demands so harsh they were clearly meant to be rejected. Serbia agreed to almost everything, but not quite enough. On July 28, 1914, Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. And then the alliance system kicked in like a terrible machine. Russia, committed to protecting Serbia, began mobilizing its massive army. Germany, seeing Russian mobilization as a threat, declared war on Russia on August 1st. France was allied with Russia, so Germany declared war on France on August 3rd. Germany's war plan, the Schlieffen Plan, required attacking France by going through neutral Belgium. When German troops violated Belgian neutrality on August 4th, Britain, which had guaranteed Belgian neutrality, declared war on Germany. Within 6 weeks of that assassination in Sarajevo, all the major powers of Europe were at war. What started as a regional conflict in the Balkans had become the First World War. So what really caused World War I? Was it the assassination? The alliances? The arms race? Imperialism? Nationalism? The answer is all of them, and none of them alone. The assassination of Franz Ferdinand was the spark, but the real causes were decades in the making. Europe had built a system so unstable that almost any crisis could have triggered a continental war. If it hadn't been Sarajevo in 1914, it might have been something else in 1915 or 1916. World War I teaches us an important lesson about how complex systems work. It shows us how military buildups, rigid alliances, and aggressive nationalism can create a situation where war becomes almost inevitable, where rational leaders can make reasonable decisions that, step by step, lead to catastrophic results. Over the next 4 years, this war would kill more than 17 million people, redraw the map of Europe, topple empires, and set the stage for an even more devastating conflict just 2 decades later. The Great War, as it was called, was supposed to be the war to end all wars. Instead, it showed just how fragile peace can be when nations prioritize power over cooperation, when pride overrides prudence, and when the machinery of war becomes too efficient to stop. Understanding why World War I happened helps us understand our world today. Many of the borders, conflicts, and political dynamics we see now have their roots in this war and its aftermath. The question we should always ask is, are we building systems that make peace more likely, or are we, like Europe in 1914, arranging the dominoes for the next great catastrophe? Thanks for watching. If you found this helpful, please like and subscribe for more history content.